It was the summer of 2007 when my family moved into a quiet house on Sycamore Lane. From the outside, it didn't look like much. A narrow two-story home with peeling paint and a sagging chain-link fence that leaned toward the street. At first, it felt ordinary, but my first memory of that place wasn't the house itself. It was the sound. A knocking, slow, deliberate, and patient, echoing from somewhere we couldn't quite place. A week later, my parents left for an overnight trip. I was 15 and old enough to stay home alone. At least that's what they believed. That night, silence filled every corner of the house. No traffic, no neighbors, just the hum of the old refrigerator. When the first knock came, I froze. 3 sharp raps against the front door. I crept to the peephole, but the porch was empty. I tried to laugh it off. Maybe kids messing around? But then came another knock. Not from the front, from the kitchen door at the back of the house. I ran there, heart pounding, only to find nothing again. That's when it hit me. The knocking wasn't random. It was moving, from one door to another. I bolted upstairs to my room, slamming the door shut. I sat on the bed, clutching my phone. No service. Not even a single bar. The silence returned, until the knocking started again. But this time, it wasn't at a door. It was at my window. 2nd floor. No balcony, no ladder. Just a slow, patient knock, inches away from where I sat. I pressed myself against the wall, refusing to look. And then, I heard it. A whisper through the glass. My name. Dragged out slow, broken, like someone learning how to speak for the first time. Daniel. My throat locked. No one knew my name here. No one. I couldn't stay. I had to run. I darted down the stairs and yanked the front door open, ready to bolt into the street. But what I saw outside froze me where I stood. Every single porch light on Sycamore Lane was out. The entire street drowned in blackness and fog. And in that fog, just beyond the edge of the yard, figures standing still, waiting. I slammed the door and stumbled back, gasping for breath. The knocking came again, but this time from every direction. The walls, the floor, even the ceiling. Dozens of fists pounding in perfect rhythm, rattling the house like it was alive. My vision blurred. My ears rang. And then, just as suddenly, silence. When I opened my eyes, sunlight poured across the living room floor. I was lying on the couch, disoriented. Everything looked normal. My phone had service again. The street outside was quiet, ordinary. My parents came home hours later, laughing, asking if I was okay. I told them nothing. But every night since, when the house grows still, I wait. Because sooner or later I know I'll hear it again. That knocking, patient, waiting. The house was unusually quiet that night. Emily had the place to herself for the weekend. Her parents away visiting relatives 2 towns over. At first, she relished the silence. No television blaring from the living room. No voices calling her from the kitchen. No footsteps upstairs. Just her. The soft hum of the refrigerator. And the faint ticking of the clock on the wall. She made herself a cup of hot chocolate, pulled a blanket over her legs, and settled into the couch with a book she had been meaning to read. But after an hour or so, the silence began to feel different. Not peaceful, but heavy. It pressed against her ears, making every creak of the wooden floor and every groan of the house's old pipes sound, louder than usual. She tried to brush it off. Old houses always make noises at night, she told herself. It was around 11 p.m. when Emily heard it, a faint tapping sound at the window. At first, she thought it was a tree branch. The wind must have picked up outside. She ignored it, trying to focus on the words on the page. But the tapping came again. Steady, sharp, almost intentional. Her book lowered slowly from her hands. The living room window was behind the couch. She turned her head just enough to glimpse the curtains swaying, slightly as if stirred by a draft. But the window was closed tight. She got up, her heart pounding just a little faster now, and tugged the curtain back. Nothing, only the dark, fog-draped yard and the dim outline of the fence at the edge of the property. Relieved, she laughed nervously and let the curtain fall back into place. Probably her imagination. The tapping didn't stop. A few minutes later, it came again. Louder this time, and from a different window. Emily froze, the hot chocolate cooling in her mug. Her breath caught in her throat. Someone was outside. She tiptoed to the hallway, trying to listen. Tap, tap, tap. Now it came from the kitchen window. Emily slowly walked toward it, gripping the edge of the counter like a lifeline. She forced herself to peek outside, squinting into the darkness. There was nothing, no person, no movement, just the fog pressing against the glass like a heavy blanket. And yet, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was out there, watching. Emily turned off the kitchen light, hoping the darkness inside would help her see better outside. Her reflection disappeared, leaving only the faint outline of the yard. That's when she saw it. A shape, tall, thin, standing near the edge of the fence. Her stomach dropped. The figure wasn't moving, just standing there, staring. She blinked hard, and for a moment it was gone. But when her eyes adjusted again, the shape was still there, slightly closer than before. Emily stumbled backward, her hands shaking. She whispered to herself, "It's not real. It's not real." Emily backed away from the window and grabbed her phone. She dialed her parents, but the call went straight to voicemail. She tried again. Nothing. Her hands shook as she typed 911 into the keypad. But before she could press call, tap, tap, tap. This time it wasn't a window. It was the glass sliding door leading to the backyard. Emily's heart nearly stopped. She turned slowly, and there, through the fogged glass, was the clear outline of a hand pressed against it. She dropped her phone in shock, backing into the wall. Whoever was out there wasn't just tapping anymore. They were trying to come in. Emily didn't wait another second. She grabbed her keys, ran to the front door, and bolted out into the cold night air. The fog wrapped around her, but she didn't care. She just needed to get away from the house. Her car sat in the driveway, and she fumbled to unlock it. Behind her, the faint sound of tapping echoed again, this time from multiple windows at once, as if the house itself was surrounded. She forced the key into the ignition, tears stinging her eyes, and the engine roared to life. She didn't look back. As the car sped down the empty road, the house disappeared into the fog, the tapping fading with it. But the sound lingered in her mind, like a warning she could never escape. I was 13 when my family moved into the old 2-story house on Willow Drive. At first, it felt like a dream come true. The place was bigger than anything we'd ever lived in, with wide wooden floors, tall windows, and a sprawling backyard that looked perfect for summer nights. My parents called it a fresh start, but even in that first week, I felt a heaviness at night. The house seemed to breathe differently after dark. The walls creaked, and the wind pushed against the siding in strange rhythms. From my bedroom, the biggest window in the house looked directly out over the backyard. During the day, sunlight poured in and made the room glow. At night, though, that same window became a sheet of black glass. It felt less like I was looking out, and more like something could be looking in. It started on a Wednesday night. I was lying in bed with my headphones on when I thought I saw movement outside. Just a flicker, like someone brushing past the glass. I froze, staring at the dark pane. My room was on the ground floor, so the thought of someone being that close to my window made my stomach twist. I told myself it was a branch swaying, but when I leaned forward to pull the curtain shut, my breath caught. Just for a second, I swore I saw a face. Not clear, not detailed, just the pale impression of features in the dark. And then it was gone. I didn't sleep much that night. The next morning, I told my parents, David and Claire. My dad chuckled, saying I was probably spooking myself with too many horror movies. My mom brushed it off too, insisting it was just shadows, or maybe a neighbor passing by. But we didn't have neighbors that close. Not behind our house, anyway. The backyard stretched into a patch of woods, and beyond that was just open land. Nobody had any business being under my window. Their dismissal didn't help. If anything, it made me feel even more alone. 2 nights later, it happened again. I was awake late, pretending to read with a flashlight, when I heard it, faint tapping against the glass. I froze, every muscle locked. The tapping came again, Slow, deliberate. Not the scratch of a branch or the rattle of rain. This was knuckles on glass. I inched toward the curtain, my heart hammering, and pulled it back just an inch. There he was. A man crouched beneath the window, his face tilted upwards, staring directly at me. His skin looked pale and stretched, his eyes wide, unblinking. He didn't move, didn't speak, just pressed, one hand flat against the glass as if testing the barrier between us. I screamed. By the time my parents rushed in and flipped on the lights, the window was empty. That night, David called the police. 2 officers came and swept the backyard with flashlights. They found footprints in the dirt under my window. Deep ones, too deliberate to be a prank. They promised to patrol the neighborhood for the next few nights. But I could tell from their tone they didn't think much of it. Probably a drifter, maybe someone passing through. But I knew better. Whoever he was, he came back. A week passed without incident, and I tried to convince myself it was over. But on Friday I woke at 2 a.m. to the sound of breathing. Not inside my room, outside, right beyond the glass. I sat up slowly, staring at the curtain. My chest tightened as the faintest shadow shifted, and then the tapping began again. Tap, tap, tap. But this time, it wasn't just the window. From the hallway, I heard Lily, my little sister, scream. I bolted from my room and found her standing at her own window, white with terror. She pointed outside, sobbing, "He's under mine too!" That was enough for my parents. We didn't sleep that night. Bags were packed before sunrise, and by noon, we were on the road to my aunt's house across town. The police were called again, but this time the backyard was empty. No footprints, no evidence, nothing. The man was gone. We never moved back into that house. My parents put it up for sale, and within months, another family bought it. I never heard if they had the same experience as we did. Years later, I still remember that pale face under the window, the wide, unblinking eyes, the way his hand pressed against the glass like he was testing for a way in. Sometimes I wonder if he was just a drifter, someone broken and wandering. But then I remember the way he moved, silent, patient, always waiting until the darkest hours of the night. What terrified me most wasn't that he came once. It was that he came back, again and again, watching, waiting. And to this day, I can't sleep in a room with a ground floor window. It was a late autumn evening when Emily Parker settled into her small countryside home. The wind outside whispered through the trees, carrying with it the smell of damp leaves. Inside, the house was warm and lit softly by the glow of a single lamp on the side table. Emily had always loved these evenings. Quiet, calm, predictable. She brewed herself a cup of tea and sank into her old armchair near the front window, letting the warm steam fog her glasses. Beyond the glass, the yard was swallowed in shadows, the porch barely visible under the pale wash of the moonlight. For a moment, everything felt safe until the sound came, sharp and sudden. Creak! Emily froze. The unmistakable groan of the porch steps drifted through the stillness. She held her breath, straining her ears. Maybe it was the wind, she thought. Maybe the wood had shifted with the drop in temperature. But deep down, she knew the sound too well. It was the sound of weight, footsteps. Emily set her teacup down slowly, her ears alert. The creak had stopped. No further movement, no rustling leaves, no crunch of boots on gravel, just silence. She stood and tiptoed toward the window, careful not to make a sound. The curtains fluttered lightly from the draft, and she pulled them aside just enough to peer out. The porch was empty. The steps were bare, no shadow, no figure. Her heart thudded. She whispered to herself, "It's nothing. Just the house, old wood." Yet the silence that followed was too perfect, too staged, as though something out there was holding its breath too. Then after a long pause, creak, another step, this one closer to the door. Fear surged through Emily as she hurried to the front door. She pressed down on the deadbolt, twisting it until the metal clicked firmly into place. She checked the chain and then the bottom lock, all secured. Still, she couldn't shake the thought of something or someone standing silently on her porch waiting. The old clock in the hallway ticked loudly, each second dragging. Emily backed away from the door, clutching her sweater around her. Then came a soft sound, a delicate rattle, the doorknob turning, just slightly, as though tested. Her heart pounded. She whispered shakily, "Who's there?" But the only reply was the sigh of the wind. Emily couldn't sit still. She grabbed her phone and thought about calling someone. Her sister, the sheriff, but she didn't want to sound paranoid. Instead, she turned off the lamp, plunging the room into shadows, and crouched low near the window again. The porch was still empty. The yard stretched quiet and endless under the moon. But as her eyes adjusted, she noticed something. Just beyond the porch, in the far corner of the yard, a figure, tall, motionless, standing, where the shadows thickened under an old oak tree. Her stomach dropped. She blinked hard, but the shape didn't vanish. Whoever it was, they were watching her. Emily pulled back from the window, her breathing ragged. She stumbled toward the phone, her trembling fingers dialing 911. But before she could press call, creak, the porch steps groaned again, louder this time. As if 2 feet pressed down in unison, Emily spun toward the sound, her phone slipping from her hand and clattering onto the carpet. The figure she had seen at the tree was gone, vanished. And now, the sound of slow, deliberate steps moved closer. First one, then another. Creak! Creak! They stopped right outside her front door. Emily backed away, pressing her hand against her chest as her heartbeat thundered. She whispered prayers under her breath. Then she heard another sound. This time, not the steps. Tap, tap. She whipped her head toward the side window. Her blood ran cold. A pale face pressed against the glass, eyes wide and unblinking, staring straight at her. Emily screamed, stumbling backward. By the time she looked again, the window was empty. Nothing but the reflection of her own terror staring back at her. Emily ran to the kitchen and grabbed the biggest knife she could find. Her hands shook, but she clutched it tightly. She turned off every light and crouched in the corner, waiting for something, anything. The steps didn't come again. The face didn't return. Hours passed until the first hints of dawn touched the horizon. When she finally dared to open the door, the porch was empty. The yard was still, but on the top step, carved deep into the wood, were 3 fresh scratches. Emily stared at them, her stomach twisting. She knew she hadn't imagined it. Something had been there. Something that had watched her, tested her door, stood on her steps, and whatever it was, it might come back.